a Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich is going through crates of manuscripts in a Jesuit villa outside Rome, sorting through what the library no longer wants to keep. He's buying in bulk. Then he opens one particular volume and stops. 200 and some pages, bound in vellum gone soft with age. Every page covered in flowing, confident handwriting, the kind that comes from someone who's written this alphabet 10,000 times before. Except it's an alphabet unlike anything Voynich recognizes. Roots braided to the wrong kind of leaves. Circular star charts pointing at no real sky. Pages of women bathing in green pools connected by a plumbing system that looks more like a diagram of the inside of a body than anything architectural. Further in, fold-out pages unfurl to several times the width of the book. Circular diagrams, rings within rings, dense with symbols that read as almost astronomical and almost anatomical at once, matching nothing in either category. Voynich buys it. He spends the rest of his life trying to prove what it says. He never does. No proposed reading has ever achieved scholarly consensus. Not from the cryptographers who broke Nazi codes for a living. Not from the historians. Not even from modern algorithms built specifically to find patterns humans can't see. A little over 600 years old, and still, nobody can read a single sentence of it with any confidence. But there's a stranger possibility than simply not being clever enough to crack it. Maybe nobody was ever meant to. You're watching A Tale to Pick. We investigate ancient mysteries, buried truths, misread history and more. Subscribe to uncover what got left out of the record, because every era left a tale to pick apart. Start with what isn't in dispute, because there isn't much of it, and it matters. In 2009, scientists at the University of Arizona took 4 tiny samples from the manuscript's vellum and ran radiocarbon dating on them. All 4 clustered tightly. The animal skins this book is made from were prepared sometime between 1404 and 1438, not centuries later. Not a clever modern forgery on old parchment either. The ink and pigments match ordinary materials any European scribe would have had on hand in the early 1400s. That single result quietly ended over 100 years of guessing. The dealer who found it had nicknamed it the Roger Bacon Cipher, convinced a 13th century friar had written it. The dating makes that impossible. Bacon had been dead 200 years before this parchment existed. Nothing about the materials is exotic either. Ordinary enough that it could have come from an ordinary monastery supply cabinet in 1420. The ownership trail becomes clearer around 1600, when it belonged to a pharmacist at the court of Emperor Rudolf II in Prague. His faded signature is still there on the first page, found centuries later under ultraviolet light. A 1665 letter even claims the emperor once paid a small fortune for the book, convinced it held secrets worth having. That's an unusually well-documented paper trail for an object nobody has ever been able to read. Most anonymous medieval manuscripts vanish into total silence long before anyone thinks to write down who owned them. From there, it moved through exactly the circles you'd expect. Alchemists, scholars, codebreakers in Prague and Rome, none of whom could read it either, before vanishing into Jesuit collections for roughly 2.5 centuries. Voynich found it again in 1912. Yale has held it since 1969. The physical structure is just as well documented. 6 sections, no table of contents, no index, nothing to tell a reader where one idea ends and the next begins. Unidentifiable plants that match no known species, astronomical charts built around constellations that don't exist. Nude figures bathing in strange, interconnected pools plumbed together like something anatomical. Giant fold-out diagrams that unfold to several times the width of the book. An apparent pharmacy section of jars and herb fragments. And finally, pages of short entries. Each one marked with a small star, like recipes with no readable ingredients. And here's the strange part. The writing isn't random. Handwriting analysis identifies 5 separate scribes. The writing itself isn't uniform either. Statisticians studying the text have identified 2 distinct patterns running through it, as if 2 related but different systems of writing were both in use across different parts of the manuscript. And the text behaves statistically like language. The same handful of words used constantly, most words appearing only once or twice, the pattern real languages follow and gibberish typically doesn't. So, genuinely medieval, still unread, and statistically structured in ways that are difficult to dismiss as random scribbling. That much isn't up for debate. Here's that stranger possibility from the opening. The phrase that follows this book everywhere, the greatest unsolved cryptographic mystery in history, is doing more work than the facts underneath it. That phrase assumes something. It assumes somebody, 600 years ago, sat down and deliberately built an unbreakable code, hid a real message inside it, and that message is still in there waiting for the right mind or the right machine to pull it out. Every headline about the manuscript leans on that assumption. Every fresh attempt to crack it treats failure as proof the code is simply that good. But a serious chunk of the people who've spent their careers on this book aren't so sure there's a message in there at all. Not a wrong language, not a badly broken cipher, possibly nothing. A text built to look meaningful without ever being asked to mean anything. Think of the difference between a locked safe and a safe with nothing behind the door. Both are equally frustrating to try to open. Only one of them is actually hiding something. If that's true, this isn't a 600-year-old code nobody's smart enough to crack. It's 600 years of people trying to decrypt something that was never built to encrypt anything in the first place. The mystery isn't the difficulty of the puzzle. It's whether puzzle is even the right word for what this is. Keep that split in mind, because every theory from here on lands on one side of it or the other. 3 explanations claim this territory. Here's what each one actually has to answer for. Cipher, the oldest and most stubborn theory. This is a real message, hidden behind a substitution system, waiting to be reversed. World War II-era codebreakers took a serious run at it and never produced a confirmed reading. They proved fairly early on it isn't a simple substitution cipher, which only made the mystery more frustrating, not less. This wasn't a weekend hobby project either. Some of the very cryptographers who'd spent the war breaking supposedly unbreakable Axis codes turned their full professional attention to this manuscript afterward, treating it as one more puzzle worth solving, the kind they'd trained their whole careers for. They didn't solve it. Neither did the generations of professional cryptanalysts and dedicated amateurs who followed, filling notebooks with attempted solutions that never held up to scrutiny. This is also the theory behind nearly every cracked it headline you may have seen. In 2016, a natural language processing team fed the manuscript through an algorithm trained on hundreds of world languages, and it flagged Hebrew as the closest statistical match. That result made international news within days. It also fell apart within days. The translated sentence that came out the other end was assembled with the help of Google Translate rather than an actual Hebrew scholar, and native speakers who looked at it called it nonsense. In 2019, a University of Bristol researcher went public claiming he'd identified the language as an extinct form of Proto-Romance, tied to a real Renaissance queen. the university put out a press release. It didn't take long for specialists to start taking the theory apart in public. Then the university pulled its own press release, after medievalists across multiple universities said the translation method was circular and the results were gibberish dressed up as scholarship. It's become a familiar pattern. A confident solution makes headlines, specialists test it, and the claim fails to gain traction. It's happened often enough that it's arguably part of the manuscript's actual story now. The most credible recent Cipher research doesn't claim to have solved anything. In 2026, a science journalist published peer-reviewed work showing that a hand-doable encryption method, built from ordinary playing cards and dice, the kind of tools available to anyone in the 1400s, can generate text that mimics several of the manuscript's stranger statistical quirks. It doesn't prove that's how the Voynich Manuscript was made. It proves a medieval person with medieval technology plausibly could have built something like it. That's a much smaller claim than solved, and a much more honest one. One theory down, two to go, and neither of the remaining two assumes there was ever a code to crack in the first place. Constructed language. A different theory sidesteps the idea of hidden messages altogether. What if this text isn't disguising a real language, but inventing one? If that's true, the problem isn't a missing key, it's a missing dictionary. And perhaps the only person who ever had it died 6 centuries ago. That sounds like a modern idea, something out of a fantasy novel, but it isn't. A 12th century German abbess named Hildegard of Bingen built her own alphabet, and roughly 1,000 invented words for religious and mystical purposes, 200 years before this manuscript's vellum existed. Inventing a private language wasn't new in the 1400s. It tied to a broader intellectual obsession of the era, the search for one perfect language that could describe the true nature of things more precisely than any real tongue could. A language where the shape of a word might mirror the shape of the thing it named. Under that theory, the strange botanical drawings aren't failed attempts to sketch real plants. They're organizing a private philosophical system, one whose logic the author never wrote down anywhere else. No key, no glossary, no second copy for anyone else to check their work against. It's a compelling read of the evidence, but it has to explain a real jump in complexity. Hildegard's invented language was little more than a vocabulary list slotted into ordinary German sentences. Whatever's happening in this manuscript is structurally far more intricate than that. Full grammar, consistent internal rules, page after page of it, sustained for the length of an entire book. Nobody has fully bridged that gap yet. Hoax. And then there's the least romantic answer. Maybe nobody was ever meant to read this because there was never anything to read. Sell a wealthy, superstitious buyer a leather-bound book full of confident-looking nonsense, and if he believes it holds forbidden knowledge, he'll pay well for the privilege of never understanding it. By the time Rudolf II owned it, Europe absolutely contained buyers exactly like that. Collectors and occultists willing to pay heavily for objects that appeared to hold hidden or forbidden knowledge, no questions asked, because asking questions would have meant admitting they couldn't tell real from fake either. If this manuscript was ever used as a confidence trick, that's the kind of market where it could thrive, whether or not it was built with Rudolf specifically in mind. The theory still has to answer for the handwriting and for the pictures. 5 separate scribes worked on this manuscript, alongside whoever painted the plants, the baths, the star charts. That doesn't kill the hoax theory, but it raises its cost enormously. In time, in materials, in coordinating that many hands toward one convincing lie. Whatever this was, It wasn't somebody filling pages with nonsense over a weekend. One object, three completely different possibilities. A message whose key we've lost. A language whose dictionary died with the person who built it. Or a book that has spent 6 centuries succeeding at exactly what it was designed to do. Looking meaningful to everyone who's ever opened it, including you. 600 years is a long time for a question to go unanswered. It's also a long time for nobody to have noticed there might not be an answer to find. Maybe that's the real misreading, not the language, the assumption that unread and encrypted have to mean the same thing, that if nobody can read something, somebody must have made sure of it. Thank you for watching this far. If this made you question what you thought you knew, good. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video so we know it's worth your while.